Hello, and you're listening to your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my web 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. Yes, after only 4 tries to record this particular episode, we're back!
This episode, I think there's something about this episode, something that we're going to talk about, hopefully, that just doesn't want to be talked about, I guess. I don't know, we've had a hell of a time. Anytime we've brought these particular subjects up, something has happened and caused us to not be able to get a recording down. So hopefully that trend is over today.
We certainly hope so. And unfortunately, we are also back to being on opposite ends of the country, but damn geography. Somebody get me a job in Phoenix and we'll take care of that. But anyway, so today we are on the 4th try to record this particular version of this episode, which contains material that was supposed to have been in what we called the cursed episode, which you may remember got cut short when we finally did record it, and which only took 10, 11, 12 times to get what we had down. So you are actually now, in July of 2015, listening to material some of which was meant to be released in October of 2014.
Coming at you from the past. Oh, yeah.
That's right. We get to it eventually, ladies and gentlemen. We don't leave you sitting in a lurch, for the most part.
We try not to. We really do.
For those of you who have not figured out what the subject matter of this particular episode is, it is more fun for the whole family. Hopefully, we're done with the cursed edition.
That's the hope. I've got a nice new setup here. I've got a nice clean space, nice area. Got all the necessary equipment. Everything seems to be working properly. So here we go. We're giving it a shot. Fun for the whole family, the non-cursed edition.
Dun 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 dun. And of course, everybody who has listened to this show more than 3 times know what that means. Because of course, we can't have more fun for the whole family without James Bond Jr.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
James Bond Jr. No one can stop him, but scum always tries. Young Bond cuts through each web of spies. He learned the game from his Uncle James. Now he's heir to the name James Bond. James Bond Jr. Look out, he's coming through. He's got a job to do while he rescues the girl. James Bond Jr. chases scum around the world.
Around the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Listen to that a lot.
Favorite Bond theme. In fact, at such point when we decide to do a redux of the theme song episode, that is totally being included list.
Oh, of course.
Of theme songs we can choose from.
My list would be totally different if I had known that existed when we did that episode.
It's actually emblematic of the whole James Bond Jr. cartoon because it's bad. I mean, it's really not good, but it grows on you like a fungus, and eventually you start liking it, ordering mushrooms on everything, and So yes, we will be discussing episodes 14 through 21 of Bond, James Bond Jr. Now you may notice this is more than our usual 007 episodes, and this is of course because the episode 14 got cut off during the cursed episode, so we'll be starting with that just to start neutralizing the curse.
There you go. Yeah, speaking of curses, maybe that's the part that was cursed because we laid eyes on the City of Gold when watching the episode.
Episode 14 of Bond, James Bond Jr. Sorry, titled City of Gold, and it is about, go figure, a city of gold.
What? Yes.
And it's a city of gold with a curse. So tell us about the curse, Eric.
Well, in this case, the curse is a golden dragon that scares off and will kill and destroy anybody who lays eyes on this mystical city of gold. As we find out very early on, it's not really a big mystery or surprise or reveal or anything like that. The golden dragon that scares off the first people we see find the city is in fact a mechanical dragon, much more advanced than the mechanical dragon we've seen in the actual Bond films, but still the same general idea.
But is Dr. No the villain? Is this on Crab Key?
It is not. Actually, our villain is Goldie Finger, who I'm assuming is supposed to be some relation to Goldfinger. However, her last name is Finger, not Goldfinger. But her first name is Goldie. Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I'm really damn confused, actually.
And, of course, she is not to be confused with Goldie Gold, who is, of course, an associate of Richie Rich, who happens to be very much like James Bond Jr. Just don't go down that rabbit hole, folks. At least not without lots and lots of tequila. Speaking of things from the southern reaches that make people sick, we do have the comic relief of the episode being our favorite snob, Trevor Noseworthy, eating a burrito first thing when he arrives on the Caribbean vacation because, of course, we all know that the students at Warfield Academy, where James Bond Jr. attends, go on field trips all the damn time. Yes, this was back in the 90s when schools were paying for those things. Anyone remember those days?
I don't think they were paying for the kind of field trips that these guys get to go on, fortunately. They got to go on some really cool field trips. What I find fun is it's not the entire school going on these field trips. It's always just a small section of students, and it's always drawn by a head. It's always completely random, and yet it's always James Bond Jr., usually Phoebe, and Gordo Lighter, and usually, they kind of rotate back and forth. Sometimes IQ gets to go, sometimes IQ has to stay back and only sends gifts with Bond on the trip, but it seems like the same people get picked a lot here. I would be looking into that if I were going to that school.
Especially if I were Tracy, considering that she's almost always the one left behind. And in this case, it is Tracy and IQ who get left behind. But what does IQ send with James Bond?
Well, he's got his bag of tricks, of course. Oh, geez, it's been which one was it? I get them so confused.
Shoes.
The inflatable. That's right. The shoes that pump up, except they don't pump up inside like pumps.
Remember those? Everybody remember those?
They pop up their own little water wings.
If the people came up with this epised, looked at a pair of Reebok pumps and said, "These are so frickin' ridiculous. We've got to employ these somehow."
Right. Yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. Did he have a special watch this time, or did he just have his standard watch with the torch?
I think he just had the standard torch watch.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
It seems to me that somewhere around, maybe it was episode 12 or maybe 13, that he stopped getting a different watch every single time. I think in this most recent block that we watched, I recall off the top of my head him only getting one special watch. I remember him using the torch watch a lot, but I only recall one other special watch if I'm thinking correctly. But then again, we have been prepping this for a while, and while I tried to refresh myself a little bit with a couple of these episodes, I didn't go back through and rewatch all 8 of them again this recently.
What? You didn't want to suffer that much for your heart?
I've watched them all once and a few of them twice. I think that counts. I think that counts for something, guys.
And of course, the other thing about inflatable shoes, it does make your feet look bigger, and you know what they say about big feet? Well, of course, does James Bond Jr. have to worry about that? Investigation? No, kidding. However, he is going to have a little bit of trouble this time and this is something that really does stand out in this episode, because remember, this is a youth to young adult oriented cartoon. I mean, this is standard Saturday morning cartoon fare. This is not Adult Swim or MTV or anything like that.
Oh.
But what we have in the early 90s, because remember, James Bond Jr. is made in the gap in between the Dalton and Brosnan eras on film. Goldie Finger, even though it's not explicitly stated, is really obviously a lesbian.
And if she's not, then her friend definitely is.
Yes, her hench person, who definitely does not want to be called a man, Barbella. But the overtones there are just striking. And, I mean, if you have any kind of gaydar whatsoever, there's just no way you can miss this. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, this is something you really did not see in cartoons in the 90s. So it's just a really standout thing that I thought was worth mentioning, just because it's so unusual.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, looking at it now, it doesn't even seem, whatever. But looking at it through the lens of when this was originally aired, and getting past the fact that somehow this got aired, people actually watched this. But even getting past that, it is something that you kind of look at and think, oh, all right, so, all right. Cool. But for the time, that was pretty damn progressive.
Indeed. Of course, all that means is that she's not going to be interested in James Bond Jr., but don't worry, because the archaeologist who is looking for the City of Gold has a daughter. So James Bond Jr. does indeed have someone to hit on, go on long moonlit strolls with, and of course to make Tracy jealous from afar.
Right. I was about to say, you almost think for just a moment that maybe Tracy's actually going to get her way, but no, that will not be the case.
Nope. In fact, the archaeologist's daughter sneaks Bond into the City of Gold. And of course, that city was built by quote-unquote island tribal people.
Way to be specific, guys. Way to be specific.
And when Gordo hears about the City of Gold, his exact quote is, like tubular! That is actually what he says. I don't even have to up. Yay, 90s.
Oh, yeah.
The odd thing is, this episode seems to be a remake, and we're only 14 episodes in, of an episode we saw before, because as I recall, when we met Goldfinger earlier, he was trying to melt down a whole bunch of gold to steal for his own purposes, and gosh, that's exactly what she's trying to do.
Weird,
and she's going to melt down the City of Gold and have it drain into a waiting tanker. Never mind the molten metal somehow not burning through the hull of the tanker or making it weigh so much that it just sinks to the bottom, because logic. But, that's okay, because
if you're going to think that far ahead of the logic, you have to look at how they were planning on melting the City of Gold down in the first place with the giant mirror that they were just going to reflect sunlight down. It wasn't a magnifying glass of any type or any type of, any kind of magnifier or collector of any type, just a mirror. We're just going to reflect sunlight on it, and it's just going to melt down completely.
Archimedes laughs at you! But of course, James Bond Jr. can foil this mirror with a shiny burrito wrapper.
He uses their own tricks against them. Yes, I love how he flashes the burrito wrapper, which evidently Gordo has just been carrying around a multitude of burritos, and his solution to everything is a burrito. So it's fitting that at the end of the episode, the solution is a burrito. I actually think that was probably the most clever thing in the entire episode. The fact it's like, okay, Gordo's been trying to shove burritos on people the entire episode. Knows where he's got a tummy ache. Here, have a burrito. Something else is going wrong. Here, have a burrito. Now it's like, oh crap, there's a helicopter up there. What are we going to do? Here, have a burrito. And it works. Flashes the burrito wrapper. The pilot gets disoriented and somehow manages to crash exactly into the giant mirror they were going to melt down the city. So, hey, burritos, man. Power.
Is that a burrito in your pants, or are you just happy to see me?
Only scum knows.
Ooh, if there's scum on your burrito, I suggest going to see a physician.
I think they have
not Dr. Molly Wormflash, though, because she doesn't need to deal with it.
Oh, dang it.
Moving on, though, speaking of Dr. Molly Wormflash, Never Lose Hope is the title of episode 15. It was a bad segue, I know, hey.
Hey, whatever works for you there. Yes, Never Lose Hope is the name of the next episode, because we have a substitute teacher by the name of
Hope Eternal.
Hope Eternal. Because I'm wondering what her middle name might just be. I don't think we ever learned it in the episode, but...
Well, it's not Strawberry.
Maybe it's Brooks, Stream?
Springs?
Oh, that would work. That would work well. No, some type of, natural water thing.
And of course, Gordo thinks she is quote-unquote a babe because he's Gordo. Well, I wonder if he offered her his burrito.
Like, totally. Oh.
Tubular.
Yes, evidently. So we're introduced to Miss Hope Eternal. And this is, of course, after James Bond Jr., has been attacked by a clown at the mall. I mean, as one does. And they make a point that this was the third attempt for somebody either trying to kill or kidnap him in that, week or something. And then they kind of gloss over that, and they're just like, oh, hey, new science teacher. Cool.
Well, but before we meet the new science teacher, we also run into IQ, who demonstrates the new gadgets, including James Bond Jr.'s jet sneakers and his rocket flare watch.
Yes. There was the watch. I knew there was a new watch in there. He had the rocket flare watch and the jet sneakers, which were fun, especially when they didn't quite work as planned right away. I actually quite enjoyed that part.
Indeed. And apparently, Hope Eternal has several degrees in electrical engineering. Not just one, but several.
Several,
Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin.
But of course.
And she's an expert in brainwave research, and her father was captured by scum last year.
Yes.
And what makes that even more interesting is this is only, if I remember correctly, the third time that 007 has been specifically mentioned in a James Bond Jr. episode. And really the first time where it's mentioned that 007 conducted an operation specifically against scum.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Because according to this episode, James Bond 007, the year before, actually invaded the scum laboratory where Hope Eternal's father was, destroyed it, but in the process, Hope Eternal's father apparently was killed.
Oh, so sad. I hope she doesn't, want revenge or something. That would be shady, huh?
Dum, dum, dum.
So, yes, that's what we come to discover in the episode is that Miss Hope Eternal, in fact, does want revenge on Mr. James Bond, and she's going to achieve that revenge by brainwashing not brainwashing, but by frying James Bond Jr.'s brain into a mindless vegetable, I guess, and that is going to be her revenge against him. Thankfully,
but of course, James Bond Jr. happens to have a flare watch and jet sneakers.
Yeah. Rocket flare watch, jet shoes, can't go wrong.
Yeah.
So he manages to destroy and get away from the evil villainess's plot, her little mind eraser machine. And then...
And, of course, in order to activate the jet, you click your heels just like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz.
There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Yeah, exactly. As one does,
And then there's a final twist to the episode, which, just because you should watch these two, I won't tell you what it is.
Oh, I do want to kind of discuss that twist, though, because I thought it was kind of shady.
Well, okay, you can tell them what it is.
I mean, we've spoiled everything else. We're going to be like, okay, we're going to spoil every single episode of the show, except for this particular episode. This one we're not going to spoil. No, we find out that, in fact, her dad is not dead. He's been in hiding. James Bond actually did get him out of there before destroying the facility and killing all the scum agents, but he got her dad out of there, and he's been in hiding because if she were to know that he was alive, scum would have come after her, looking to get that revenge. So... everything's all cool. They're like, hey, look, your dad's here. She's like, oh, man, my dad's still alive. Hey, sorry about the whole, capturing you, trying to kill you, trying to scramble your brain stuff. We're cool, right? We're good? And they're like, yeah, of course. Whatever.
She says as she's let off in handcuffs, right. To which Gordo, sadly, does not have the key.
It's just amusing to me that they're like, yeah, it's cool. No worries. You thought your dad was dead. It's cool. It's all good. We don't mind that you lost your damn mind. I mean, seriously? That didn't sit well with me. I was like, wait a minute. They're like cool with her now? They don't mind that she tried to kill him?
Well, hope springs eternal.
Evidently. Because, yeah. That was a little rough for me personally. I didn't necessarily find that part particularly... I'm complaining about realism in a show that obviously is not known to be full of said realism. So I think I'm getting what I'm asking for.
We all know what Eric would have said had Hope Eternal asked him to forgive her. He would have said, no such luck.
Okay, much better segue. Much better.
Which
much
is,
better
of course,
than
the
last
title
one.
of episode 16.
No such lock, eh? I wonder what this episode is about.
Could it be an episode that takes place at Loch Ness?
What?
And might there be a Loch Ness monster eating a boat that happens to be crewed by Scotsmen with horrible accents? And just in case you didn't realize this was Scotland yet, the boat is called the Lovely Lass? And the captain's name is McGregor?
Wait. This episode's set in Scotland?
I know,
I
right?
knew I missed something. I'm kidding. They make it painfully obvious that this episode is in fact set in Scotland. They want you to know, and know very well, in fact, that this episode is set in Scotland, and there's no mistaking about it at all.
But gosh, if there's a metal Loch Ness monster, then obviously it's not the real Loch Ness monster, which means that obviously it's a submarine. What villain could possibly be piloting a submarine like the Loch Ness monster? I can't imagine.
Dr. No.
We'll find out. But first, we have James Bond Jr. and friend entered into a golf tournament because, golf team. Now, this is actually kind of plausible because lots of schools have golf teams. So, okay, fine. However, James Bond Jr. is going prepared thanks to IQ because he has a pocket extendable adjustable club with guided smart ball.
Smart balls.
No, this is not something that he bought at the adult toy store. His pocket extendable club with these smart balls.
My favorite part of this is the fact that obviously, IQ gives him this stuff. Here you go. Here's this super cool, like the club. Okay, cool, no problem. It's not cheating really. It's just like an all-in-one club basically. You can change the size and angle of the head. You can extend or make the handle longer or shorter. Like I get that. That's probably
you can put
perfectly
it in a J
legitimate.
shape.
Then he introduces the microwave-guided smart balls, which actually are able to...
if you look, it'll come.
Exactly. Anywhere you look, the ball goes, we'll say. Because I don't want to be that dirty. But, and of course, James Bond said that's a very clever invention, IQ, but that would be cheating and it would be wrong. I can't use these in the tournament.
So, of course, which person who attends Warfield Academy would see this kind of thing and say, yes, that's for me, cheating, all right.
Well, totally... Oh, no, not him. How about one of the many girls who's in love with James Bond? No, not them either. Who could it possibly be?
Coach Trevor?
Mr. Noseworthy the Fourth. Yes, that makes more sense than anything else. Definitely.
However, it turns out that James Bond Jr. is not going to be able to pit his normal golfing skills against Trevor Noseworthy's cheating because he gets sick. Why does he get sick? Because a lovely Scottish lass who's come to report on the golf tournament suddenly gets a call that there has been an incident at Loch Ness and she's going to investigate that immediately. James Bond Jr. thinks it's far more interesting than golfing with Trevor, so he fakes being sick, and Trevor ends up being able to play with the smart balls throughout the episode.
But of course.
But James gets to keep the adjustable club. With no balls.
As one does.
So as James Bond Jr. and the lovely reporter go out to Loch Ness with IQ, because of course he couldn't bring the girls along, they find out that the submarine is piloted by...
Oh my gosh. It's Walker de Plank. I love that character.
Jaws.
Oh yeah, Jaws is there, because Jaws has always been Walker de Plank's hench person on some planet, I think, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
That I'm not familiar with right now.
And the whole point of all of this is that Walker de Plank wants to steal the missiles off of a British naval cruiser that happens to be cruising across Loch Ness because, naval cruisers loaded with high-powered missiles just cruise along landlocked lakes all the damn time.
But of course.
And he wants to use these missiles to destroy the one and only satellite that is used to spy on Scum. Because there's only one satellite, and because apparently Scum, despite being able to build gigantic submarines that look like the Loch Ness Monster, can't afford its own missiles.
Yes. Well, that seems legit to me. I mean, honestly, the level of technology necessary to build one missile has got to be at least 10 times that as to build a sophisticated submarine that actually is shaped like and can behave like a giant monster. Is that not the case? Am I wrong here?
Makes sense to me.
No, it doesn't. Dang it! Don't justify their tomfoolery here. This is absolutely patently absurd, is what it is. But it's no more or less absurd than anything else we've seen in any of these episodes. So it's not like we can really look at this one particular example and be like, oh, well, this is ridiculous compared to everything else we've seen in these shows. I think it's par for the course.
Now, of course, James Bond Jr., the lady reporter, and IQ try to prevent the theft, but instead, Walker D. Plank gets away with the missiles, and the captain of the British ship arrests James Bond Jr., IQ, and the lady reporter for leading him into a trap.
Of course.
Because, of course, they're obviously scum agents. However, IQ shows his bravery and says, "Save yourselves!" Lets the other two escape, while he blocks the way and says that he only has to tell them his name, rank, and serial number. And he can prove, yes, he can prove that James Bond Jr. is innocent.
How?
All the captain has to do is let him use the naval ship's computer to access the anti-scum satellite, which of course you're going to do is you're going to obviously allow someone who you suspect of being a terrorist to do, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You just want to use my computer? You just want to get under there and like dig out all the wires and like hook stuff up? Okay, all right. We'll let this play out. See how it goes.
And of course, James Bond Jr. saves the day with a plastic explosive golf ball. Yes, finally, one of his balls explodes with all of its fury after he extends his magic golf club.
And as usual, Tracy was nowhere to be found to see it.
Oh.
Now, I remember him going over the golf club. When IQ gave him the special tools, he gave him the golf club, he gave him the balls, so that were like... Now, here's the thing that bugged me the most about this episode, and I know this sounds petty and pathetic when we're talking about such ridiculousness as it is, but we see Trevor steal the one box of microwave-guided golf balls that IQ had given to James Bond Jr. out of his bag, and he's using them back home in the golf tournament. And yet somehow James Bond Jr. suddenly has another box of them available when he needs them to blow up this thing.
Are you saying there might ever be an occasion where James Bond Jr. doesn't have the balls for the job?
I'm saying that there's a giant plot hole here, giant enough to float an entire submarine shaped like the Loch Ness Monster through, okay?
However, this giant hole is plugged by an extending golf club. Being thrust in danger by an adolescent boy.
And why not? I mean, that sounds totally legit to me, right? I'm not
My
seeing
apologies
the
to
problem.
anyone. My inner 12-year-old apparently has decided to show up and host the show.
Well, we've got an entire episode about balls, basically, so I don't know that we have any other choice. But, yeah, so what I did like about this episode was actually seeing IQ get to be in some action, instead of just being the guy who gives James Bond some gadgets and then gets in trouble later, or just isn't there. I'd like to see him actually doing something, even if it was utterly ridiculous. I still like to see that he got to do something.
Indeed, that is very nice to have seen. And you can see he's got some bravery when he does the "I only have to give you my name, rank, and serial number." So, very good. IQ should get in on some action. Absolutely. If only he had the balls.
Evidently he did. Evidently he was just carrying around several sets of them because...
For other people.
Yeah. He was like, I don't even golf, but I'm just carrying these around in case I run into anybody who happens to say, oh, hey, by the way, I like golf. You'd be like, oh, really? Let me show you this. Excuse me while I whip this out. And then he shows them his balls. And then he gives them some golfing accessories.
Why not?
But yeah, IQ, James Bond Jr., exploding balls, everything's good. Everything saves the day. They catch the bad guy, right?
Indeed, except for the part about when he escaped with his henchmen.
The bad guy and his main henchman escape again?
Because, of course, we have to have more Walker D. Plank episodes, don't we?
Evidently, they think we do. Yeah, I guess they're not, at episode 17 or 16, they're not quite yet ready to give up one of their best villains because obviously no one can escape jail later on, right? No, they have to get away right now.
Did we mention that there are a lot of episodes of James Bond Jr., even though it was only produced for about a year and a half?
There are quite a few. They cranked them out, evidently, like really, really fast.
Indeed, they did. And now that brings us to the next episode they cranked out. Episode 17, Appointment in Macau. Tell us about Appointment Macau.
Well, on this one, we get to see some ninjas. Oh, yeah.
Pirates, then ninjas. Makes sense.
Yeah, of course. You got to have that juxtaposition. You got to have both represented. Otherwise, the pirate people are going to get all mad if you don't have ninjas, and the ninja people are going to get all mad if you don't have pirates. So, instead we get to see pirates one episode, ninjas the next. And in this one, they're kidnapping the brand new transfer student who happens to be an expert at judo right before, evidently, Warfield Academy is going to a judo competition. Weird, right?
Ow.
I know, it's crazy. But James Bond is able to help her out, keep her from getting kidnapped, because that's what they were trying to do, kidnap her. Why? Probably because her dad knows something that Scum wants. That just seems to be the way these things go.
Indeed, considering that her father is a counselor for the Raven Triad, not to be confused with Raven, who happens to run Revenge Lover Designs, one of the sponsors of this episode.
For samples and inquiries, visit revengelover.com. Nice plug. Yes, so this new judo student, or this new student who also does judo, Lily Mai, some random
Lily Mai,
generic Asian-sounding name. They didn't go for a cheap pun this time. They just went for the generic Asian-sounding name, I think. But
well, that's because what the actual head of the Raven Triad is low fat.
Of course he is. Forgot about that. It's like that old joke. How long is a Chinese name?
How long is it?
Anyways, so James Bond Jr. is able to thwart the kidnapping and save of course, beautiful Lily May, because I don't even know. So that brings us to now they're going to be friends, and he's going to hit on her, of course, as he does, and Tracy's going to get jealous, as she does. But yeah, she's so good at judo. Why can't she be on the team? She doesn't want to go on the trip. Why?
Well, because if she goes to Japan, that would bring her too close to all of these Asian people who are trying to go after her father. And of course, in order to get to her father, they'll get to her. That's why all these ninjas keep trying to kidnap her. Oh no! And of course, they finally do. When she's out on a gazebo with James Bond Jr., where they were totally not going to make out, really.
Nah, not at all.
Nope,
I think their intentions were completely pure.
Oh yeah, totally. Pure as the driven mud. But that's okay, because even though she's kidnapped, she's now James Bond Jr.'s friend. And James Bond Jr. convinces Coach Mitchell that, on the way to Japan, they can stop at Macau, which is where he heard the kidnappers say they were taking her, so that they could save her. And while he's on the way to save her, he can use his brand new watch from IQ, which IQ himself says has so many mods that it may not actually be able to tell time.
That was actually funny. I liked that part. When he basically is explaining to him, it's like, I've put so much extra stuff in there, I wouldn't count on it to tell time properly. That's the one thing it probably can't do.
Nope. But it can create an electronic poltergeist, basically frying out every single electronic device inside of range and making it spark and go haywire and all that neat stuff. I can't imagine what might happen if that might be important at the climactic moment when James Bond Jr. has to save Lily Mai and or stop the evil plot of the bad people. And who could possibly be the bad people in an episode that takes place in Asia?
Why, it has to be Dr. Wait, is it Dr. Fu Man? No, that's not it. It's Dr. Man, no. Dr. Fu Man, no. I just can't remember.
Dr. Martian Manhunter? No.
It's James Bond Jr.'s version of Dr. No, who appears to be some sort of alien.
Who is, of course, not at all representative of the quote-unquote yellow peril because he's green.
Of course not.
Yes.
Because if he was yellow, that would be racist. Come on.
Right. However, he does have a mobile island, which in other words is a gigantic submarine, so gigantic that its top is made to look like an island because Scum can't afford to buy its own missiles.
Yes. They got this submarine thing down, though, okay? They're cool with submarines. They're like, dude, submarines are jam, yo. If only, the rest of the world wanted to trade submarine technology for missile technology, we'd be, totally set. We wouldn't even have to do all this kidnapping, all this other garbage, man. We would just be like, hey, how about we build you a couple hundred submarines, and you build us a couple hundred missiles, right? Even trade, guys, come on. But, no. They'd prefer to use these fancy, gigantic submarines to try and steal missiles. Because they're scum.
Indeed. See, it's too bad they didn't wait 20 years, because then what they could have done is they could have gotten their own show on some cable channel and operated some kind of customized submarine chop shop. Maybe
Pimp
out of
your
Las
sub.
Vegas or something. And it's like, we took this former Soviet submarine and we chopped it up to look like a brand new Camaro. Check out the fins on this baby.
The sad part is I could totally see that happening. Like, that doesn't even seem like... If somebody could actually do that, that, the Learning Channel... I know, that would be actually too much actual learning for the Learning Channel, I think. It would have to be...
This would be something more of a Discovery thing.
Yeah,
they're the ones
Discovery.
who had... Oh, man, I can't even remember what it used to be called now. Shit. No, the one that sticks out in my mind now is actually on History, called Counting Cars, but there was the American Chopper.
Oh,
That's what I was
okay.
thinking of.
I was thinking Pimp My Ride, but that's something totally different.
That's MTV. But yeah, same line. Pimp My Sub.
There you go.
Maybe they could have a co-sponsorship with Jared, the Subway guy.
Oh, no. You don't want to have a co-sponsorship, anything to do with him.
But whatever could go wrong with that?
Yeah, as long as you don't ever have to use his computer for anything. Yikes. Yeah.
But anyway, long story short, Dr. No is thwarted. They win the judo tournament. Were you expecting anything else?
Well, yeah, because now that... Well, we kind of glossed over the fact that her father was not actually working for the Triads. We want to make absolutely clear that her father was not a bad man working for the Triads. No. He was undercover with the Triads. So, he's actually a good guy. It's important to note that.
Indeed it is. Now, what is unresolved is that... Is Lily Mino staying at Warfield Academy? We didn't see her in the next few episodes, spoiler alert. So I guess Tracy is back to being insecure about total strangers as opposed to being insecure about someone who's already there. And, that does underline something that keeps coming up. For being such a hero, man, James Bond Jr. sure is a dick to his girlfriend.
Is Tracy actually supposed to be his girlfriend? Did they say that? Because if so, then he's a total douche.
That is pretty much the implication. Let's face it, we know who she's named after.
Yeah, of course.
And yeah, he is really a douche to her. In fact, he's also kind of a douche to Phoebe, who's obviously the Moneypenny equivalent here.
Yeah,
and
she's got that whole unrequited love thing going on with him, but yeah.
I mean, yes, he's the most polite, nicest douche ever, but he's still, both not so fresh and very fresh at the same time.
You ever have that not so fresh feeling?
Perhaps. But you know what might fix that? Aladdin's lamp.
Oh, yeah. Are you sure? Because I've heard that lamp produces nothing but darkness.
Which brings us to episode 18, Lamp of Darkness, which is, spoiler alert, about the search for Aladdin's lamp. Why? Because after some cities of gold and such, and things in tombs in the middle of the desert, we decided to keep going with this Indiana Jones theme in the middle of a James Bond cartoon. Why not?
Of course not. Basically, you got to take what works and try to use it for yourself. I think that's where they were going with this one because, this was kind of an interesting episode. Now, I will admit that I had some trouble watching this one. I was going through... I don't know where you were watching these. I was watching these all on YouTube. And the show listing that I found for that I was watching to just watch them through had this broken up into 3 parts. Except part 1 was actually part 3, part 2 was part 2, and part 3 was still part 3. And I couldn't find part 1, so I missed the first third of this episode.
There's one guy, and the reason I'm not calling him out is because, let's face it, anything on YouTube with this is not copyright legit, so I don't want it taken down. Certainly not before we've done all zillion episodes of this. But theoretically, there may be one person on YouTube who has uploaded the entire series. So if you just look for this one person's feed, it doesn't take a whole lot of searching to find it, because there's several people who've put up a bunch of episodes, but there's one guy who, if he existed, seems to have put up the entire thing.
Doesn't seem like they're rushing to pull these down very quickly. So I think we're probably pretty good.
Probably. But in any case, Lamp of Darkness.
This one I did miss the first third of the episode. I did catch the middle and the end, though. So
yeah, the first third actually starts off with the thing that bothers me the most, and that's the henchmen, who are... I actually wrote in my notes, fat ginger clods. They are.
I saw them. They're present in the rest of the episode as well. So yes, I saw them.
But they're also the first thing that you see in the episode. They're called right brain and left brain, even though they have no brain. And they are the idiots in service of Cortex. And Cortex, of course, wants Aladdin's lamp. And the only way he can get Aladdin's lamp is to put together a secret map made from 4 Persian rugs. Now, all he needs to do is put these Persian rugs together in their proper sequence, and he will see the map. And for this, he needs to break into rich people's houses and steal the rugs. Yes. Never mind that it would have seemed a lot simpler to take 4 photographs of the rugs, which he ends up doing after he gets the rugs, and put them together. So one questions why he had to steal them and arouse suspicions in that. Oh, right, because breaking into Trevor Noseworthy's house is how you arouse James Bond Jr.'s suspicion.
Ah, there it is, right there. There's the reason. There's always a good, valid reason in the end, isn't there?
Indeed there is.
So he steals Noseworthy's the third's, I guess, because it's Noseworthy's the fourth's father, so you have to imagine that he's the third. He steals his lamp, or not his lamp, I'm sorry, the rug, so that he can find the lamp.
Indeed. And after we do this, go figure, it is a straight-up Indiana Jones episode because you're going through the tombs and you have to go through a whole bunch of traps that look absolutely everything like the traps that we saw in Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, and maybe a Raiders of the Lost Ark or two.
The Penitent Past.
Watch out for that rolling boulder!
Oh, jeez.
And then we have a wishing contest because it turns out that the magic isn't in the lamp, it's in the giant crystal inside the lamp, which if you break it into 2, we'll have 2 wishing crystals.
Of course.
But James Bond Jr. is clever.
Yes, he is. In fact,
he wins the wishing contest by having a very clever wish. And that actually is a very clever wish.
It is, except for the fact that the way they explained how the wishing crystal worked wasn't necessarily just a wishing crystal, like make a wish. It was more of a think of something. Like they very specifically said you had to think of something and it would materialize, not just make a wish, which that kind of actually irked me a little bit because I'm like, okay, first of all, they took it away from a scientific way of, they took it away from a supernatural explanation first, which is what, it's Aladdin's lamp, make a wish, okay. And then they changed it to being just a scientific type of thing. Oh, it's this crystal that makes things that you think about appear in real life, appear physically, and it made it sound more scientific. And then they took it right back by saying that he was able to wish that the other person's wishing stone wouldn't work anymore. Like, that's not a physical manifestation of a thing. It's, taking it more back to the whole wishing aspect of it.
I'm sure that the scriptwriter wishes you wouldn't think about it so hard.
Oh, I'm so sorry, dude. So sorry. I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know, but maybe it's time for a hostile takeover.
Yes, indeed, hostile takeover. This one was actually kind of a fun episode, to be honest with you. Like comparatively to the rest of the episodes, this one had a little bit of fun to it. We had some, pretty insane technology that wouldn't actually exist, but still fun.
But you know what else it had? Zombie lasers!
Pew, pew, pew! I like that they actually called it, because most of the time when we see guns shooting in James Bond Jr., you hear a gun, but what you see is a laser bolt, and what you see hitting something or, ricocheting off of something is not a bullet. Because I'm assuming that in the 90s it probably wasn't cool to, shoot guns at teenagers on TV. So right. I'm guessing that's why they had to do the lasers. But then in this episode, they actually say that they're lasers instead of just ignoring that fact and just pretending they're guns like everybody else is.
I would say that's, yeah, and it was refreshing. Though, I gotta say that the full-body holograms...
That's some straight Wade Wilson stuff right there. That's how Deadpool gets around in the world, with his disfigured face. He has that full-body hologram generator that he keeps on him at all times. I was like, all right, all these guys are Deadpools.
Except, they don't swear and they're not cool or anything like that.
Yeah, except they suck. I mean, except for that part. I mean, we'll ignore that part and then go with the rest. But yes,
but who doesn't suck? James Bond Jr.
Of course,
which is why people want him to run for class president. He thinks it's preposterous, but as Gordo says, everyone thinks you're way cool.
It's because he is, man. He is way cool, obviously. So yeah, they want him to run for president, and of course, Trevor Noseworthy IV is also going to be running for class president. But before the election can take place, what happens? All of a sudden, all of the staff of the entire school is replaced on a whim because of some training that they need. And so they need the entire staff of the school to be randomly swapped out for a week. And
gosh,
of course, during this time,
be a scum plot.
And of course, during this time, it's not just enough that they are. We're going to swap out staff for. This is only for a week. This is only for a limited amount of time. Yet the new superintendent or the new principal comes in and changes everything. He is the friend of the student. He comes in. He's like, "There's not going to be a test. There's not going to be any finals. There's not going to be any homework. You know what? You learn what you want when you want." We're just cool with everything. Just do what you want. So, of course, all the students are like, yeah, we like this guy. This guy's awesome. But he's not fooling everybody. There's one student who thinks something might be up. Who could that be?
Could it be James Bond Jr.?
What? It could be indeed. So, yes, immediately, Mr. Bond Jr. is suspicious. And
it's a good thing, too.
Yeah, it is. Because it turns out to be just what we thought it could be. A scum plot.
Yes, they would like to capture the head of the British Secret Service, who is, of course, not called M.
No,
nope.
Of course not.
He's called Billings.
Admiral Billings. Sir,
yes,
sir. So, yes, they want to capture Admiral Billings, presumably to make them do as they wish with him.
Or at least so that they can replace him with a hologram dummy.
Yeah. Since they have that technology, you'd think it would be easier to just do that maybe in transit somewhere. Maybe you know where he's going to be and when he's going to be there. They know he's going to be visiting that school on that day. They couldn't set up an ambush for his car, just replace him then.
But if they'd done that, you wouldn't get to see Phoebe shoot Trevor with a gum gun. Which is actually one of the coolest moments that I've seen so far in all of James Bond Jr.
The gum gun was fun, and Phoebe specifically shooting Trevor with it was extra fun. Also, the look on Trevor's face when he goes to tattle on James Bond Jr. to who he thinks is the principal, and he finds out that it's actually James Bond Jr. wearing a hologram. Oh, yeah.
Of course. But, that's how things roll in James Bond Jr.
It really is, isn't it? This episode had some fun moments. I really actually, of all the episodes that we watched for this particular show, I think this was probably my favorite. I'm not saying it was good, but it was fun. And we did get to see some pretty deep stuff with the guys thinking that James had actually died at one point because they see him being chased off a rooftop and shot at. We later find out.
Never mind that it looks like he stops and waits. Are you going to shoot me yet? Are you going to shoot me yet? I could have escaped like 5 minutes ago, man. Yeah. Are you going to frickin' shoot me yet?
Like, come on, man. Come on. Do it. So we get to see that, and that would be about it. Essentially, same dumb stuff as every episode, but this one, for some reason, I just had a little bit more fun watching than some of the others.
Yeah, it plays like decent Saturday morning cartoon fare, which is good because that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. It works out pretty well for that.
And by the way, friends at home, just so you know, we are dedicated to making sure that this episode isn't cursed, like the last couple times we've been trying to do it. That's why, without your knowledge, we just pause to do a check of the recording to make sure that everything is going okay. Why?
So far, so good.
Because we don't want to be on a cruise to oblivion.
That would stink. That would absolutely stink. Hey, wait a minute. That's also the name of episode 20 of James Bond Jr. Did you know that before you said that?
I did. And yes, it is a cruise to oblivion, not to be confused with Raven Cruise, who is the revenge lover of Revenge Lover Designs, who sponsors this episode and all of the episodes of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. So do check her out at revengelover.com.
Nice. That's 2 plugs for her. She'll be happy. She'll be happy about that.
She's a very nice lady. I'm glad I finally got to meet her.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Raven's awesome. She is amazing. She's done logo work for us, obviously, for the sponsorship, the 4-Eyed Radio logo that you see on our 4-Eyed. If you go to 4eyedradio.com, if you go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/4Eyed Radio Network. She's also done the logo for Comicare, the charity I work with. You can go to comicare.org and look at that logo. It's also on the Facebook page at facebook.com/Comicare.
And seriously, guys, do check that out. It is a really, really worthwhile cause that does a lot of good for a lot of kids who are having a really bad day otherwise.
Yeah.
So if you can at all help, by all means, check out comicare.org.
Yeah. Check it out. Go buy a T-shirt or a decal or something like that. It helps us keep doing it, keep delivering those comic books to the kids in the hospital. So that's all we hope for. But yeah, Raven did the logo for that as well. She donated that work to the charity, so that was fantastic. She's done stuff for me, for Matthew Renfro over at the Fro Show. He got a new logo that she did as well. So yeah, just fantastic artist. She does a ton of great work, so check out her website. Do it. Yep. Follow her on Instagram too.
Eric keeps telling me that there might coming something for this particular show as well, but I know not what, I know not when.
It's been kind of in the works, kind of on the back burner because she does have other stuff going on. I should probably check with her and just see where that is in the works, but it's kind of been really low priority type of thing, so haven't
totally
really,
understandable.
Haven't really
it is not a cruise to oblivion. Back full circle.
Now this is an interesting episode though, because here we have a cruise, we have a submarine, we've got a sunken treasure ship. Who's our villain in this episode, do you think?
It's not Walker D. Plank.
It's not. And that's probably the best thing about this episode is the fact that you've got all these nautical themes and no Walker D. Plank to be found. Instead, you have the original Goldfinger himself, Auric Goldfinger. Because this sunken ship has a bunch of gold on it, evidently. And
yes, it is a sunken Spanish galleon. And wow, check out the crazy eyes on this particular instance of Goldfinger.
I'm more interested in the fact that Goldfinger has his henchman there. He's got Oddjob, yeah.
And Oddjob talks this time, and he totally sounds like he's all dope and stuff.
Yeah.
He's full gangsta.
And then the other henchman he's got, somebody that we're also familiar with, but not for having anything to do with Goldfinger ever, Knick-Knack.
And we've seen Knick-Knack before in James Bond Jr., but he wasn't particularly knick-knacky. Whereas this time, Knick-Knacky is a little bearded dude who sounds kind of like Herr Velasquez.
He does.
I mean, you could almost hear him saying, "Da plane, da plane."
So interestingly enough, I actually looked it up real quick because I was like, is that actually the guy who did they get that guy to do this? And no, actually it's the same guy who normally voices IQ was also doing Knick-Knack in this episode, Jeff Bennett. But, hey, you never know. He did a good job of imitation. But it was weird to see a Goldfinger Knick-Knack team up to me, I guess.
Yes, indeed. But Goldfinger, of course, would like to raise that Spanish galleon so he can get the gold.
Yes, because evidently the only way to get the gold off the ship is to raise the ship. Evidently there's absolutely no way to just take the gold off of it. Evidently you're fine getting down there. You're in a submarine already. You're down there. I don't understand why divers can't just pull the gold out of there under the water. But okay. So he's got to raise the ship, but he can't do it. He's having trouble. His guys can't handle the job. What's going to happen?
It's such an odd job, but they can't do it. No, they need help. They need someone with a high IQ.
Oh, well, I guess they're going to have to go to the academy and kidnap IQ, right?
No! Why? Because several people from the academy, of course not all 100, several of them, no, just a small group that happens to include James Bond Jr., IQ, Tracy this time.
Amazing.
Wow. Yes, the gang, as we know it, is on a cruise. Is it a cruise to oblivion? Could very well be.
Evidently.
It's on a cruise ship called the Phoebe. Could it be named after Phoebe? Could be. Maybe it's owned by her father. Oh.
We may never know.
Indeed, but what we do know is that the moment they get on the ship and the female cruise director welcomes them on board, James Bond Jr. hits on her right in front of Tracy.
Yes.
Because he's a douchebag.
That's why I start to question. I'm like, wait a minute. Are we actually supposed to believe that she's his girlfriend? Because literally she's right there. And she's like, would you like to make dinner plan? He's like, yes, I'll have dinner for two. For me and what's your name? Okay. Smoothie McSmoothpants over here. Jeez. And of course, but she likes it. She's, oh, oh.
Of course, we find out that she's not really a cruise director.
Oh, no. She is, in fact, a CIA agent.
Who was still perfectly willing to go out to dinner with a supposedly underage.
Because nothing's
Bond
weird about
Jr.
that, right?
Right.
Because he's British, so it's okay, right? That's what she's going with. When the inquiry starts, when they those funky Europeans. I mean, swinging London's still a thing, right? There you go. Yeah. So when the inquiry starts, when she's giving her deposition, she could be like, "But he's British, so it's cool, right?" I mean, they're like 10 years older than they actually are, I think.
Yeah.
They'd be like,
"But you know what?
Yeah, totally, you're good."
You know what actually is cool? When Oddjob and company board the cruise ship so that they can kidnap IQ, and Oddjob shoots a laser at James Bond Jr.
Pew pew.
Who deflects it with a frying pan, and then it hits a chicken.
Oh, he
and
didn't love that chicken, evidently.
Takes out Oddjob. You love chicken.
Oh, yeah. I love the chicken. Oh, yes. Yeah, came in handy this particular episode, so that's good news.
Yeah, can't get enough of them chickens.
Yeah. So he kidnaps IQ and forces IQ to devise a plan for him to actually raise this ship, which IQ, of course, is able to figure something out because he's IQ. And what he figures out that is he's going to need some kind of counter-lever weight. You're going to attach a giant chain to this sunken ship, string that chain over an oil rig that just happens to be there, and then attach the other end to something heavy that you have to sink down to then raise the other ship.
Never mind that the physics of this totally do not work.
It's like the thing that is already sunk would just be an anchor, I think, but, and then both things
you might wreck the oil rig.
Sink, and then what are you attaching the chain to that's so strong on both of these ships that it's not just going to rip that off instead? Anyways, not to mention the destruction of the oil rig in the process. But yes, of course, IQ figures this out, and the only question is, what can we sink that's heavy enough? I recall there being another heavy object in this episode.
Could it be the Phoebe? And no, that's not a fat joke.
Yes. So then, of course, and IQ is threatening the entire time. IQ had been threatened by Goldfinger the entire time. If you don't figure out a way for me to do this, I'm going to sink that ship with all your friends on it. And then when he does figure out how to do it, he's like, "Oh, good, I'm going to sink that ship with all your friends on it."
But you said you wouldn't sink it if I helped you. Well, I guess I can't be trusted.
He's a bad guy, IQ. Come on. What were you expecting?
But that's okay, because in the ultimate cockblock, because of course the references come out again because apparently my inner 12-year-old is still hosting the show, when Goldfinger tries to whip out his torpedo to take out the cruise ship, James Bond blocks it by whipping out his fishing rod.
He always has to prove that he's got the bigger stick, huh?
Apparently so. And there's a giant explosion, and it's all wet.
Ew.
But that's okay, because as Goldfinger says, "You may have slowed me down, Bond, James Bond Jr." Yes, he actually says it that way.
Of course.
"You may have slowed me down, Bond, James Bond Jr., but nothing is going to stop me from getting the gold, except for the fact that I'm the bad guy."
Of course.
But that's okay, because Goldfinger's going to escape anyway by hopping into his own cylindrical object and shooting off.
Pew, pew, pew. Yes. He somehow manages. They've got him dead to rights. They're right there. They're standing right next to him, but yet he's able to not only get away, but say, "I'm going to get away in my escape torpedo. Goodbye," and gets in and goes before anybody can be like, "Hey, wow, why didn't we stop?"
And he's even nice enough to take his henchman with him, because that's the kind of high-quality villain.
Yep. Again, we've got the situation where evidently they're not quite ready to give up this villain yet, so they need to make sure that he's around for a future episode without having to explain a jailbreak.
And we already know he's going to be, because I have looked at the episode descriptions in the future, and oh yes, he will be back.
Like, oh yeah, that dude's going to be back.
But in the meantime, it's a race against disaster.
A race against disaster.
Yes, episode 21 of Bond, James Bond Jr. And what happens in this race against disaster?
Well, I think our evil villain, who I don't think we've seen this one before yet, have we?
Yes, we have.
Oh,
we saw him in the episode where the giant scaffolding in the middle of Paris. Where will we ever find this sort of thing?
That's right. I forgot about that. I tried so hard to forget about that.
You're welcome.
Yes, Dr. Derange. Not to be confused with Dr. Demento. Totally cool.
We are the worms. I remember that song. But anyway, yes, Dr. Derange has an evil plan to steal liquid plutonium.
Yeah.
Because apparently that's a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
And it's a thing that you can put inside of a tanker truck because, yeah, it's a thing. And the way he's going to do it is by stealing a race car that's meant to be racing in the Le Mans Grand Prix. You know, the start of this episode sounds like a really bad Schwarzenegger movie. Specifically, I'm thinking of The Last Stand, which I had high hopes for when it came out as just a bad B movie of the sort that I would normally enjoy.
Yeah.
But no, it sucks. It's terrible.
No, just bad. Really, really bad.
Yeah. I mean, there have been some okay Schwarzenegger movies, but that's not one of them.
Yeah, not it.
So, of course, we have Dr. Derange, who is taking the place of this famous British driver entering the Le Mans race because, of course, when you enter a race at Le Mans, they really don't check your ID when you get in a car. It's just whoever the hell happens to show up.
Of course.
They're the ones who get to race.
Yeah,
After all, that's how Tony Stark got to be in the race in Iron Man 2, isn't it?
I think that was because he had billions of dollars. And he's like, guys, I want to race a car. And they're like, but you're not one of the... Guys, I want to race a car. Oh, yes, sir, Mr. Stark, sir. I
don't think Donald Trump could get away with the same thing. I'm just saying.
They'd be like, sir, you do not fit inside the car.
And besides, your toupee is going to blow off and it's going to blind a driver.
Oh, speaking of Donald Trump, I'm just going to throw this warning out there. Never read the comments. Guys, internet rule number 1 for me. Beyond anything dangerous clicking aside, don't read the comments ever. Oh, man. Anyways, that's all I'll say about that. I'm not going to try to take the discussion down that road, but...
No, I completely understand. And, you know, there's a reason that my own website does not have a comment section. But you know what does? The Her Majesty's Podcast website, which you can find at hermajestyspod.com.
Yes.
So if you have any comments about this or any other episode, just go to that episode section on our site, and by all means, do leave us a comment.
Yes, and we will read those comments because they're moderated.
Yes, we will read those comments. They're moderated, and so far we have not had to get rid of any of them because our listeners are cool people and not dicks. Yeah. And we really, really appreciate that.
With the exception of the automated spam ones, which get filtered out automatically and we don't hear about. But
yes. So good job on
comments,
you, real human beings.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Yes.
So please leave comments. We don't necessarily see them the same day because sadly we have lives we have to attend to. However, when we do see them, we will read them and we will often comment back.
Yes. Yeah, we try to respond if any comment requires, if it's a question especially. But even if it's not a question, even if it's just a comment, we like to at least acknowledge that we've seen it and read it, and thank you for taking the time, even if it's something that you don't like. We accept that. We accept the criticism. We might not change anything. We're not guaranteeing that we're going to change anything, but we do like the feedback, so thank you.
Yes, and feedback is very important to our next episode of this podcast, but that's a little ways off. Let's still work on this one.
Yes.
So, bringing it back full circle. Of course, once we realize that this car has been stolen by Dr. Derange, we have to stop it somehow. And how do we do that? Why, a race car number 7! Which is driven by James Bond Jr., because they don't check your ID when you try to race at Le Mans.
Evidently. Again, they had a car, which
they
I
just
think
make
stole.
sure that you breathe properly and push.
Yes. I don't think that's exactly it. But, yeah, so he's racing this car, which, of course, in the, 5 minutes that they've had access to this vehicle, IQ has managed to make some modifications, including giving the car some wings.
They're very Spy Hunter, of course, is very James Bond.
Yes.
So we get to do the oil slick and that sort of thing. And, hey, we even get wings on the car because Always gives you wings. IQ gives you wings if only they worked. But that's okay because when you drive off of a cliff and you're plummeting down and your wings don't work, all you have to do is make sure that you land squarely on some high-tension lines, which will totally break your fall, at least long enough for you to then hop off of those and into a hay wagon.
Yes, as one does.
As one does.
Yeah, that was one of the less plausible parts of this episode. You've got the bad guy who evidently they had to win the race in order to steal the plutonium. I guess, coming in second, they wouldn't allow for the theft of the I don't understand that. But so they had this...
I think it was just that he had to be able to outrun anyone who was trying to catch him.
Oh, okay. So, because he had the oil slicks, he had the spikes that he could throw out behind him. He had all the tire shredders and all this stuff that could, incapacitate other drivers. And that's what he used against James Bond Jr., who then goes plummeting off the cliff, tries to deploy his car's wings, which immediately snap off. But it's a good thing he's got jets on the back of that car because they were able to push him towards the high-tension electrical wires, which totally didn't, fry the car when he landed on them. Instead, they just break his fall, drop him perfectly into a hay transport, which he's then able to drive right out of and say, thanks for the hayride, and go on about his business.
And then, of course, he goes to a winery, because get thee to a winery quickly, where he then finds himself having a pressing engagement.
Yes, which actually was a very Bondish. It had some Bondinessosity with the bad guys putting the good guys into a grape presser and turning it on and leaving them. That had some Bondinessosity to it.
That was actually my favorite part of the episode.
The way they escape from the grape presser did not have any Bondinessosity to it at all. It had much more...
an airbag doesn't make any sense to you?
Stay Puft Marshmallow Man to it than Bondinessosity. Yes, IQ at the beginning of the episode had pointed out that he built an airbag into James Bond Jr.'s outfit, his actual racing suit, that would go off on impact so that he would be safe if he got into a crash. Because that's the proper way to use an airbag, is to surround yourself in it as opposed to actually having it in the vehicle to break your... Anyways. But evidently not only would this go off on impact, but also it could just go off whenever he wanted it to, because he was able to just set it off seemingly by thought, because I didn't even see him push a button or pull a cord or do anything. He just, hey, check this out.
Well, being able to expand on command... That's something the chicks go for.
It is. That I can attest to. So, yes.
But you know what? What else? Also, it happens to be something that is, depending on who you ask, either a sought-for skill or a really, really, come on, there's things that work better than this. And that is when James Bond Jr. gets to the nuclear power plant, doesn't receive the garbled instructions from IQ, who of course we would expect to know how to work things at a nuclear power plant about to go into meltdown.
Yeah.
But James Bond Jr. knows how to solve things when a nuclear power plant is about to go into meltdown. Because, why? Well, the thing that caused the whole problem to begin with is someone took the rods of disaster and pulled out. James Bond Jr. knows that the worst thing you can do is pull out. So what does he have to do? Thrust the rods back in. Because chicks dig that sort of thing.
Oh my gosh.
Because my inner 12-year-old is not done yet.
Oh my goodness gracious.
This is your fault from the last episode, by the way. I'm just telling you.
Yes.
You started this.
The rod and stopped the meltdown in this case, whereas usually it starts the meltdown. But this time it stopped it, and we were good to go.
Yes. And then James Bond Jr. manages to save the day by driving a really slow tanker truck rig, but it's not slow. Why? Because there's liquid plutonium in the gas tank. And no, that doesn't make anything blow up. It just makes everything go faster. Because
when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit. Oh wait, no, not that kind of powered by plutonium.
But of course, when Deranged thinks that the inevitable climax is about to happen, he bolts. Because he doesn't want to be around for that. He doesn't want everything to blow up all over his face.
We're going to have to put a disclaimer on this episode, man. Jeez. It's all good. It's all good. So yeah, of course, he gets away because we got to see Dr. Derange in a future episode, probably.
Which is kind of sad because he's kind of a pathetic, sort of villain. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But that is episodes 14 through 21 of Bond. James Bond Jr.
Sorry.
You're totally into that guitar. I bet that if this were included on Guitar Hero, you would buy Guitar Hero just to play the James Bond theme.
I had a version of Guitar Hero. I actually quite enjoyed playing it. I had 3, I think. It was on the PS2, which was the most recent PlayStation I've ever owned.
Whether or not I've owned a PlayStation depends on your version of Community proper. So, let's just say I didn't. And that said, I think Guitar Hero 3 was the version that also was owned with this particular PlayStation. Yeah. And I knew better than to even try.
I found it to be amazingly fun, which is surprising to me because normally I'm not really into that sort of thing, and I'm not very musically inclined to begin with. I mean, I played tuba in the high school band, and that was it.
That totally makes sense to me. I'm just saying. That totally makes sense.
But no, it was just really fun, and I was actually pretty decent at it. I could play on hard level. I didn't get perfects or anything like that, and Through the Fire and Flames kicked my butt all over the place.
Well, isn't that supposed to be the one that kicks everybody's butt?
Yeah, except you can find the videos on YouTube of the people getting perfect on it. I'm just like, I can't even move my fingers that fast in a random pattern, let alone in actual patterns. So
true story. The concert tour, Video Games Live, I did attend one of those once. And the day before and earlier in the day, they had qualifiers for Guitar Hero. Huh. And out of the people who entered, they picked the winner who they thought would do the best, so that during the concert, during what would have been what you'd call the intermission period, they had this dude come up on stage, and he would win a prize if he could make it all the way through the fire and the flames without crashing and burning.
Right.
Now, they only were going to require him to do it on easy. He demanded to do it on hard.
He's like, no, guys, I'm a professional here. Don't mess around with me.
And he was. He actually did it perfect.
Nice.
So they loaded him up with like a few grand worth of Alienware stuff. Sweet. So it was pretty cool.
All right. So, hey, paid off for somebody.
Oh, yeah, and if anyone ever is any kind of gaming fan, I do recommend going to a Video Games Live concert if you get the chance. It is just a really, really great show. They do basically the orchestral score music from every era of video gaming you can think of, back to the old school 8-bit days to modern MMOs. I mean, they were, of course, the big one that everyone was cheering for was Sephiroth's theme from Final Fantasy, but they were doing absolutely everything. I personally love the Super Mario piano solo, which is actually a ringtone on my phone.
Nice.
It's just really great concert. So, off topic, if you ever get the chance, go to a Video Games Live show.
I told you about Player Piano, didn't I?
No.
Oh, if you dig orchestral interpretations of video game music, definitely check them out. Just go to YouTube and search Player Piano. It's this group. It's this guy and this girl. This girl is a amazing piano player. I think she's from Russia or something like that. And what they have her do is she'll listen to something for the first time. And they were specifically doing a bunch of video game songs, and she can listen to it and arrange it immediately, like boom, on the spot. Like listen to it for a few seconds and be like, okay, here we go, boom, boom, and play it and then embellish it. It's freaking amazing. And then when, she'll do those quick on the spot ones, but then they also do full arrangements, and some of the videos that she did, the main Tetris theme, freaking amazing. She's also done a few others that are just mind-blowing. And she's done some other stuff other than video game stuff too, but definitely check it out. It's called Player Piano, and it is amazing.
All right.
Check it, yo.
Now, one thing that may not be so amazing is our next topic discussion. We'll see. I haven't heard your opinion of this, but I'll be surprised if it varies much from my own.
And what is that?
This has to do with something which, when I sprung it on Eric, I didn't tell him exactly what it was going to be. I just told him that it was rare and highly collectible, which in fact it is. It's rather old, and it's getting harder and harder to find in any kind of decent condition. You can, though, if you're interested, and you can do it for a reasonable cost. Now, when we first started discussing Bond, James Bond Jr., about a year ago, one of the things that kind of struck us as odd is where would you get a James Bond Jr.? Because as far as we know, I mean, yes, it's likely that there are lots of little James Bonds out there that no one is acknowledging, but realistically, there has never been one that someone has acknowledged. The closest we've gotten is in the novel For You Only Live Twice. We know that Kissy Suzuki ends up being pregnant with his child, but we never hear anything about this again. And, of course, the James Bond Jr. we see is acknowledged by Bond, and he is in no way Asian. So that didn't happen. So the question has always been, where would they come up with this? I mean, did they just spin this out of whole cloth? As a matter of fact, no. They did not. There was pre-existing, whether you want to call it canon or not, showing where we might get a Bond, James Bond Jr. This occurred in 1967, 3 years after the death of Ian Fleming, when the powers that be were thinking, he's not writing any more books. There's got to be a way to milk this cash cow a little bit more.
Yeah, how can we do that?
And so they decided maybe they'd break into the youth market. How are we going to break into the youth market? We're going to break into the youth market with a book. A book called James Bond Jr., The Adventures of 003 and a Half.
003 and a half. Yes. Oh, why, that's exactly half a 7. Yes. When you sent me this book, and I received it, and I looked at it, and I said, what in the heck is this? And the first thing I noticed is that right on the cover it says, The Daring Exploits of the Nephew of 007. So right there we have that origin story right there. It's not his son. It's not actually James Bond Jr. It's just James Bond, who happens to be a kid named after his Uncle James, who is the actual 007.
Never mind that James Bond was also supposed to have been, as far as I ever had seen and have seen since, an only child, and yet, nope, apparently he has a brother who is an airline pilot.
Yeah, of course.
And this brother is the father of James Bond Jr.
Yes.
And brother airline pilot is what I think Americans would call upper middle class. In the story as we see it, he's upper class enough to have full-time live-in house servant. However, he's not considered of the aristocracy. He's not a toff, as it were, but he's still wealthy enough to command some of that respect, or at least some of that cachet, so to speak. And so this is where we get 003 and a half, James Bond Jr., who is constantly made fun of by his schoolmates and other compatriots because, do you want to be just like 007? We're going to call you 003 and a half. Now, this immediately never, ever makes sense to me. And one of the reasons it never makes sense to me, and this is something that I also held against Ian Fleming, because in his novels, Ian Fleming made it sound like James Bond was a household name.
Yep.
His exploits made it into the newspaper. As a former professional spy himself, he should know that no effective spy's name ever makes it into the damn newspaper. The moment you're in the newspaper, you're done.
Yep. And especially not your name and your code number.
And the operational details, like, remember reading about Operation Thunderball in the newspaper? No, that would never freaking happen.
Right. But why not? Yeah, it is a little disturbing. That was one of my biggest reasons for not thinking, like, you know what, I understand, like, in the real world, if a spy was outed and shown to be a sex fiend, okay, maybe in that era it would be something, but James Bond is known as this, and he's already known as this, so blackmailing him with a videotape proving it means nothing to me.
It has nothing to do with the fact that it's James Bond. It has to do with it's an official representative of the British government, just like it doesn't matter that it's American Secret Service agent John Smith who's partying it up, hiring prostitutes that are paid for by cocaine cowboys. It's the fact that he's a Secret Service agent. That's the problem.
I get that. I just don't get it.
And you notice all the news that's making?
No. But, alright. No, it's... Yeah. But yes, we have this James Bond Jr. Now, this book... Now, it's written for kids. It is written at a children's reading level, so it's not a hard book to read as far as reading level. It's very easy to read. However, I found it quite hard to read.
It was very hard to read, and I think it's no accident that, to this day, no one has officially owned up to writing it. Because it was written under a pseudonym.
Yes,
it was written by R.D. Mascot, and this person has never come forward and admitted who they are. Well, I have my own personal theory. I am almost positive I know who wrote this book.
There have been others who have claimed, and in fact the executors of this person's estate claimed. Now, whether they were claiming it because they just wanted the credit or if it was because they actually know for a fact that this is who did it. But yes, while he was alive, he never admitted to being the one. But he is accredited now for it, basically. And that's Arthur Calder Marshall. I don't think I've read anything else by him, so I don't know if the style is similar, but others have said that they found similarities in the style to other things that he had written, and his estate did claim ownership of it after his death.
However, his estate may have claimed it, but it has never been corroborated. So, now granted, he's the only one who wanted to lay claim to this. Another theory was Kingsley Amis, which is generally not accepted as a reasonable theory because even though he did write the next adult James Bond book, and I don't mean, telescoping golf club type adult, I mean, actual for the adult market James Bond novel.
Colonel Sun.
Yeah, he wrote that under a pseudonym, but different writing style, and everyone really knew who it was. Now, to me, the most interesting theory is Roald Dahl, because R.D. mascot. Just a thought. And he did do other work with involving Ian Fleming, which we'll get to, including in the same year that this book came out, he was adapting You Only Live Twice for the movie theaters. So that's the theory which, amongst a lot of Bond scholars, has gotten a lot of traction, even more so with some of them than the guy who admitted it. I've seen in the little bit of research I've done, which amounts to just a couple hours, and that's about it, admittedly. It seems to be evenly divided for people who have an opinion between those two.
Right.
And the one I personally feel more convinced by is Roald Dahl. So this is why we have two hosts.
Well, like I said, I would prefer it not to be Roald Dahl because I have a higher opinion of Roald Dahl's writing than I do of this book. So I would almost prefer it not to be him, just so that his record isn't tainted, so to speak. But I honestly, it's not something that I think we'll find out just by researching like this. Eventually, maybe it'll come out. What I do like is just the fact that in the book, the About the Author section simply states, R.D. Mascot is the pseudonym of a well-known British writer. That's it. That's all it says. So that kind of leaves it open.
It does indeed. And is there any question as to why? I mean, in theory, as mentioned, this is a children's book. It is definitely aimed at children and what was never called then, but which we would call now the young adult market.
Right.
But I would never put this book in front of a child or a young adult or a grown adult for that matter, except you. Because,
except for punishment. Oh, dang it. It's bottom line, it's just not very good. I did not enjoy this book. How did you feel? What was your first impression of the book itself?
One, I didn't enjoy it, and two, I thought it was really, really awful, not just in its execution, but in the themes that it was going for. I mean, you want to talk about extreme class consciousness, and not to show the point of, James Bond Jr. is above all of this. No, James Bond Jr. is kind of made to have to accept class consciousness in that, he is of a not quite upper enough class to be able to tell the truth anytime and have no consequences against him for saying it, that he will often have to accept lies told by more aristocratic people because they're more aristocratic, and he'll just have to deal with it. That his maid is his maid and she doesn't dare say anything, and that this girl who lives at this estate is just a commoner, and wow, is she made to be as uneducated as possible, and how could he possibly associate with such riffraff? I mean, yes, he starts with feelings for her, but every time you see her described, she's all grubby, and the book goes out of its way to say what a lousy person she is, and that her mother is really just basically a ne'er-do-well criminal, if not a whore, and that she really wants nothing to do with this kid until the kid makes the news, and then, well, I suppose she'll grudgingly take care of her again, but, doesn't really wanna. And then you have the rich aristocrat who is obviously cheating on his wife, is caught, and yet... Nope, not only can we not say that he was out cheating on his wife, but him and his lover are made into the heroes of the book, even though they did nothing and may in fact have been part of the bad guys.
Yep.
And they kill a dog.
Yeah, which is, again, and it was used more than anything else just to show, hey, this bad guy is really bad. Look what he'll do. But then in the end, the entire, what would be the climax of the story of the bad guys actually getting caught and hauled away all happens off camera, so to speak. We don't see any of it. We don't hear it.
Because
it's all after
James
the fact.
Bond gets a lungful of bad water and gets pleurisy. Pleurisy! Can you even spell that, ladies and gentlemen? I can, but I'm just wondering.
I could look it up. That would be about it. It's... You finally get to a point, and what really stinks is that's when you finally get to a point in the book where it starts to get a little better. The action scene, so to speak, when 003.5 is trying to sneak onto this property, and just a brief synopsis of the storyline. Basically, there's this huge property that somebody near James Bond Jr. owns, and part of this property there's a little cottage or something like that they have allowed Bond Jr. to use as his private little getaway. He's got some stuff there. He likes to go there, hang out by himself. Don't want to ask what he's doing there, but he likes this little spot. And then somebody comes through and buys the whole place and puts a fence up and won't let him in, and so he wants to sneak on there and get his stuff. And that's where he meets the grubby girl, and that's where he starts to think something's not right about these people who bought this place. And that's where we end up with the gold heist and everything else that happens. And it all seems to happen kind of off camera. Again, it's always stuff we hear about after the fact. We didn't get an actual heist scene. We get an after the fact. We get him. He saw some trucks, and then the next day he reads the news that there was a bank heist. It's like, oh, all right. So we don't get a heist scene. The closest we get to it is him trying to sneak onto the property, and it's page after page of him crawling through brambles. That's really about it. But that was the best part of the entire book. Was page after page of him crawling through brambles. Which tells you something about the quality of this book, folks.
And just like the James Bond Jr. we would come to know, he's a douche to the girl who he's supposedly smitten with. Because, James Douche Jr. is.
Learn from the best, I guess.
Yes, and apparently the only acknowledgement that the great James Bond 007 has ever made to James Bond Jr. is he sent him a knife as a gift, and that was it. That's his only real connection to 007, is a knife.
Of course.
Because, masculine symbols and shit.
Yes.
Go forward. Crom gave you strength. I hated this book. I honestly can't think of anything good to say about it, except except for the pursuit of knowledge. Now I know where they got the basis for James Bond Jr. I almost want to apologize to you for this, except I didn't make you buy the book. I just asked you to read it.
Well, thank you for that. No, it's one of those things that it's at least interesting to have experienced it. It's like one of those things that, hey, now I know how bad it is, at least. And the one good thing about it is coming from the James Bond Jr. cartoons and going to this, at least this doesn't have the ridiculousness of the cartoons. There was no weird gadgets, no crazy stuff like that. The plot was fairly straightforward, even though the majority of the actual action didn't happen to any of our main characters. It all happened to other people and was just observed after the fact by our main characters. But at least is fairly straightforward as far as that goes.
And yet, that's precisely one of the other things that I like about about the experience of this book. And not that I like this book, but the experience of this book made me more appreciative of the cartoon. At least because I prefer the approach of the cartoon. If you're going to give me the youthful adventures of 003.5, I would much rather that they look like the shenanigans of Warfield Academy than what goes on in this just awful disaster.
Right. I agree. Like I said, at least the only good thing about it not being ridiculous is that it seems to be a little bit more based in reality, but at the same time, it didn't make for a good book at all.
And, of course, just to show how mean and evil this writer was, along with killing a dog, the book also has a very graphic depiction of the slaughter of a chicken.
Yep.
Because this author does not love chicken. They do not love chicken.
It's so sad. So sad. But yeah, like I said, it was a tough read because it was just so bad. Not a tough read in dense material or anything like that by any stretch of the imagination, but just hard to get through because it was just so not good.
It has only come out in hardcover, so for those of you who do search it out, that's likely the only way you're going to find it. I was never able to find a softcover edition, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like one was released on either side of the pond. It was published in the 60s, and haven't seen any evidence of any modern reprints, so anything you find is likely going to be in the used category. I would say this is honestly only worth your time if you are a Bond collector who just wants to have a little bit of everything. For the casual Bond fans or the Bond curious, take our word for it, the book sucks, and just leave it at that.
Yeah, I would concur. Definitely not worth seeking out unless it's something that you absolutely want to have as part of a collection, or if you're a masochist.
Or if you happen to be the co-host of a podcast and your sadistic podcast co-host happens to mail it to you and say, hey, we're doing an episode, read this.
Definitely not the worst book I've ever read. I mean, I won't say that, but definitely not good, not recommended.
It was better than Gravity's Rainbow. I'll say that. A lot of it has to do with the fact that this was shorter. I read this in basically 2 sittings. And the reason it took me that long is because those sittings were different lunches, and I just didn't feel like extending lunch.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't take long to read. It's just a matter of for me, it was a matter of like trying to just keep reading when I'm like, there's so much other stuff I could do right now that would be much more enjoyable than reading this.
Don't I have a dental cleaning to go to?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think I'm due for a root canal. That might be a little bit more fun. Now, it's not quite that bad, but it is pretty bad.
Yeah. So, that is The Adventures of James Bond Jr., 003.5. No wonder there wasn't a second volume. However, there's another book. Another very special book. And this brings us to the other part of the cursed episode.
Dum, dum.
Yes. And this would be the material that we actually recorded the entire discussion of. All the rest of what you're going to hear, we've talked about this already.
Yeah.
But you don't know that. Because it turned out we were talking into a dead microphone or something. Because the recording went completely silent on us while we were having this discussion. So, this is something that we were going to talk to you about last October. This is something that was supposed to finally have reached your ears around January.
Right.
And which now, in July, you finally get to hear about something that a lot of people failed to connect with Bond, James Bond, and its creator.
Yep.
Because as we know, James Bond is associated with many things: sex, drinking, assassination, and cars. Special cars that do special things. Things that some people might call downright magical. And while everyone has heard of what we're about to talk about, not everyone realizes that way back when, Ian Fleming, whom we of course all think of as Father of the Year, especially having read his travelogue for a previous episode, decided to write a story for his young son, Casper. And after a while, his friends convinced him that he should publish this story for everyone to enjoy. And so, sadly, just after Ian Fleming's death, the world was introduced to Ian Fleming's Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the magical car.
Yep. Now, we're going to talk about the book first, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I like this book. This was a good book, a good children's book, to be sure. I mean, it's not, aimed at adults by any stretch of the imagination, but it was fun. It was entertaining. It wasn't inappropriate. It was actually a good children's book. It was probably some of his best actual writing, maybe, but absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm definitely, this is something that I would read to my kids. This is something I would encourage my kids to read. It was a fun, good book. What did you think about it?
I thought it was a great book. It's something that I would totally share with children. And even if you're an adult who just wants to take an easy read trip back in the Wayback Machine, I mean, yes, it's obviously written for kids, but it's not insulting. I mean, there's nothing in here that's going to make you feel like, oh my God, why am I reading this? I grew up out of this so long ago. No, if you're an adult, it's just a very quick read that you can do in a lunch or two, depending on how long you want to extend lunch. I read this in one lunch sitting, but I extended my lunch. But it's just a really good book. It's a fun book. It's got magic and adventure. And yes, it has dangerous situations, but they're nothing that should be all that upsetting. I mean, if it's going to be upsetting, it's only going to be upsetting to a very, very small child.
Right. But
certainly nothing that's going to be upsetting to most children who are basically ambulatory on their own without having to wear plastic pants. It's because realistically, yes, you have children getting threatened in this book, but it's not in a way that children are necessarily going to see as threatening as it would be to an adult. And it's all actually kind of innocuous. And it's just a fun story.
Yeah, it was an entertaining read, and it was, like you said, it was just a good children's book, and something that, I'm definitely going to be, I shared it with my daughter already, even though she's a little bit older than, the exact target audience. But if I have any more kids, I'll definitely share it with them at a much younger age. And, it's just a very entertaining book, and I would never have known that this book could be so entertaining compared to what we'll talk about next.
Indeed. But as far as the book goes, the one thing that bothers me about it, and it's really not a bother, it's just more of a matter of, remember when David Letterman hosted the Oscars and he let the Oprah Uma joke go on for like decades, even though nobody thought it was funny except for him? Ian Fleming bases the name of his primary character on what he thinks is the greatest possible pun in the world. His character's name is Caractacus Potts. Crackpot.
Oh,
Get it?
Oh!
Except, does anyone else on Earth who was born after the fall of the Roman Empire think Caractacus is an actual name?
Well, that's why it goes by crack, for sure.
Outside of the Roman Empire at all? No? Well, shit.
Well, you never know.
Yes. He is a crackpot inventor.
Yes.
And this crackpot inventor has a long-suffering wife. Yes, he's married. Happily married. With two lovely children. I don't know why I pointed out that he's happily married and in a stable family. They're not necessarily the richest, but occasionally he comes up with a good idea, like he's come up with this very interesting candy that you can turn into a whistle, which may or may not end up being a hit. But the thing is, he can't really get around. He'd like this car, which is just a total rust bucket. It's seen much, much better days. But his kids really also encourage him to get this car. So he gets it and he tinkers with it a little bit. But even though he tinkers with it, in this book, it's the car itself that really tinkers and creates its own magic. Think of a much less creepy version of Christine. So the car fixes itself. And we discover this when, after fixing up the car, the family gets into it and they're going to go to the beach. Unfortunately, everybody wants to go to the beach that day, so the road is really, really crowded, and it doesn't look like they're going to get there any time before dark. But suddenly, there's a light on the dashboard. It says push. And so Potts pushes it, and the car grows wings, and it flies, because James Bond creator cars do that.
Yep.
And then it gets to the beach, then it gets to an island, and we learn that there's a whole bunch of wrecks on this island that tend to get plundered by pirates or scrap seekers. In fact, in the book on, I think this is page 45, we're told that they pluck these boats like chicken.
There it is again. Chicken ties and everything we've talked about today. All right.
You cannot escape the chicken. And then we decide to take the adventure with the car as a boat. I mean, this car does everything. And then they chase a gangster called Joe the Monster, who, seems like kind of a petty hold-up artist, but he has his cave full of weapons that makes Hugo Drax look like a piker. Because if you're going to rob chocolate shops, which is what this dastardly Joe the Monster wants to use these kids to do, help him rob a chocolate shop.
Of course.
It's only open for 3 hours a day, but this is a very rich chocolate shop. I mean, how much more kid's story can you get when the dastardly plot is to rob a chocolate shop?
Exactly.
But I mean, it's just fun. Throughout the entire thing, it's just a sense of adventure, a sense of fun, a sense of excitement, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful book. And the ending is fantastic. And I'm not even giving away anything if I read to you what the last sentence of the book is. Because after all this adventure, Fleming then poses the question, and do you know what happened next? Even I haven't been let in on the secret. Wow, that's great! All kids' books should end like that. Let the kids' imaginations run wild. How fabulous. How wonderful. I love this book.
It was fantastic. Again, a great kids book, but not even just for kids. Like I said, it's obviously written at that level, so you're not going to be challenged by the reading of it, but it's worth reading, even as an adult. So I definitely recommend it.
Absolutely. Now, things take a little bit of a different turn. 4 years later.
Dum dum dum.
Because 4 years later, somebody decided.
Somebody did that to it. That's what happened.
Yes. And if Eric had done that any longer, we would have had to assume liability for things that happened to your mental state, and we don't want to do that.
That's why I didn't let them get into the actual song, because nobody wants that in their heads.
Yes, we're talking, of course, about the 1968 movie musical Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, which, at a running time of 2 hours and 20 minutes, is only about, 1 hour and 50 minutes too long, and...
I think you're being generous there.
Until the release of the Harry Potter series in the 21st century, this was the longest movie that had been released by Hollywood aimed at a youth audience.
And it did not need to be that long. It just drags. Anybody who's, and I'm sure many of our listeners have seen this movie, whether as kids or to their, showing their kids. This is generally considered to be a good kids movie, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why.
I would
just
never park a kid in front of this movie.
There are better ways to kill a couple hours than to put them in front of this mind-numbing trite. It's just bad. And the fact that it's based on such a great children's book, I never knew that growing, I'd seen this when I was younger. It was one of those things that, my parents had subjected me to, and I knew what it was. And when I rewatched it to talk about it, I was just, this is so bad. One thing I noted on the Wikipedia page for it, they specifically note that it is loosely based on the Fleming novel, and that
very
is
loosely.
very, very loosely, because they change so many major points. Like you pointed out in the book, how Cracketus is married happily to a living wife. In the movie, they decide that evidently we all need to be sad, so they make him a single father whose wife has passed and left him alone with these two kids, and he barely has 2 nickels to rub together, and all his inventions suck.
They spend 45 minutes showing you how pathetic his life is.
Yes.
You want to take Prozac half hour into this movie. It's just...
They spend so long just making him seem so pathetic. And I get that it's so that he can be built up later, but overdone. Way, way, way overdone.
Especially for a children's movie.
Yes. The attempt at this deep character development just falls completely flat. And it's just no good.
And it's all in service of inserting a completely pointless, useless love story that was not in the original book and didn't need to be in this one.
No. Yeah, they invent this character who is his love interest in the story and, comes to the rescue. Well, she is
truly scrumptious.
Oh, she is. That is her name, as a matter of fact, which is just as awful as that sounds. You
can tell that the references to the fact that this was written by Ian Fleming, the book, of course, not the screenplay. The screenplay was written by Roald Dahl. Hey.
I might have to take back my previous statement about him too good for the abomination of 003.5. Maybe this is a better representation.
There are many Bond references, and in fact, this is... After the beginning of the James Bond series, this is the only non-Bond movie that Albert Broccoli actually ever worked on. This is actually an Eon production, scarily enough.
Yeah, it's so not good. I mean, it's just... You got Dick Van Dyke being Dick Van Dyke. I mean, yeah, he's supposed to be playing Cracketus Potts, but it's just Dick Van Dyke being Dick Van Dyke. That's all it is. And I get that's what he does. That's all he ever did, basically. So, to expect anything different is kind of silly, but...
Though he did have a major demand with this movie.
Oh, yes.
His demand was that despite the fact that everyone else is English, he's supposed to be English, and the story, at least at the beginning, takes place in England. He would absolutely not speak in an English accent at all, because too many people made fun of him for doing that in Mary Poppins. Which he was apparently very scarred by, to the point where he really didn't like references to Mary Poppins anymore after that.
Wow.
And in an interview, which is obviously blowing smoke, he said, "This movie will out-Disney Disney." No.
Nope. It's bad, and it just drags. And there's so many places where you think it could possibly end, just doesn't. It just keeps on going, and it's pointless.
And every time you think it's going to end, they break into another horrible song.
Yes. It's a musical that didn't have to be a musical. There was nothing... The book wasn't a musical. I mean, come on, guys.
And, at the very beginning, you have reason to hope, because during the credits, you see the history of the original Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car. It was a racer. And that is canon from Ian Fleming's book. And then it ends up in the junk heap. And in one of the opening scenes, we see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang sitting there, junking out, surrounded by chickens, because even Chitty Chitty Bang Bang loves chickens.
The only redeeming feature of this movie, in fact, was those chickens.
Not true, because the gentleman who owned the junkyard was played by Desmond Llewellyn.
Yes, we did have a couple of people from the Bond universe show up in this one.
Indeed. We start off with Desmond Llewellyn in his extended cameo in one of the few places where most people are ever likely to have seen him outside of his role as Q in the James Bond movies. And then once we get to the point of that, that's when we have 45 minutes of utter depression of let's just show Dick Van Dyke being basically a lousy father who doesn't really give a crap about his kid's education, and he's all depressed, and he has no friends. Why not just stick his head to gas oven or something? I mean, he's just not feeling good at all. There's nothing. And the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car doesn't appear again until almost an hour into the damn movie. And once we get it, it's he who puts these interesting little quirks and stuff into it. The car itself is not magical.
Right.
It's just a device that he ended up creating. So it's a mechanical wonder, not a magical wonder. And I think that that's something that I wish they had done, because part of the fun of Ian Fleming's story was the magic of the car, was that even Crocketus Potts had no idea what it could do until the car said, "Hey, why don't you try it?" So it's unfortunate that it decided to go that route. And then it's also unfortunate that once we get to the beach, we're going to be hit with a double whammy with this. Mm-hmm. But the first whammy is we completely go off story. I mean, yeah, we were off story to begin with, but we go even further off story, because suddenly, when we're talking about the nasty people who are going to pluck the derelict ships like chicken, we then see an actual pirate in a floating, as in floating in the sky, pirate ship. Who is this pirate? It's Goldfinger! Well, kind of. It kind of is Goldfinger, because it is, in fact, Gert Frobe playing our villain. Our villain is Baron Bombburst of Bulgaria, which neither he nor Bulgaria was in the original story. This is something Roald Dahl completely made up on his own. I have no idea why either.
Because they needed a role for him, I guess.
And he decides he wants the secrets of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And so he decides that he's going to kidnap Crocketus Potts. Unfortunately, he ends up kidnapping Gramps. That's right, Crocketus Potts' father, who is mildly insane and who thinks an outhouse is a magic traveling device that takes him to India.
Of course.
I'm not making this up.
So
he steals the outhouse, which means that Crocketus Potts and family, and of course, Truly Scrumptious, have to take Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and follow him to rescue Gramps. And they have to go to Bulgaria. And they find out that in Bulgaria, children are illegal. Now, this is really creepy. Really, really creepy. Because, okay, you have this concept, children are illegal. So the parents have to hide all the kids in a cave. And we know that if the kids are ever caught, they're taken to the castle. They don't come out and say it, but, I think even the least creative of kids is going to put two and two together that they're murdering children.
As one does.
You have this character who's just referred to as the child catcher, who is the creepiest damn dude.
Yeah.
Creep. Yuck.
It's not good. I'd go so far as to say bad.
Hey, who would put this? This character does not belong in a movie directed toward children. This character is far too creepy, like adult level child abductor creepy. This character and this plot line do not belong in a children's movie at all. I was done with it. I mean, just yuck.
Yeah.
Just, no.
Yeah.
And then
I completely agree. It was just not appropriate in any way, shape, or form.
And then along with the children are illegal thing, why are they illegal? Because apparently Baron and Baroness Bomburst can't have any. Apparently. Of course, maybe they would be able to have children if they weren't trying to kill each other every chance they get. And this is supposed to be funny. Oh, hi, Baroness Bomburst. I just tried to kill you. What? It didn't work. Let's sing a song called Chutchy Face. Really, that's a song, and Gert Froba has to sing it.
I feel so bad for him.
But, now, sidetrack, one thing of note is, if one were to assume that Chitty Chitty Bang Bang is supposed to be funny, Gert Froba, on his own, was generally a humorous and comedic type of fellow who ended up getting typecast as a heavy after his role in Goldfinger, but he said, I'm more of a comic actor. So...
Yeah, well, this missed the mark when it comes to that, because it wasn't funny. It was just weird and creepy and bad. It really just comes back to that. You know, when anybody asks me, how was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang the movie, I can only say bad. Very, very bad.
It's the polar opposite of the book.
Yeah.
Because the book is magical and wonderful and something I would totally recommend to children of all ages. And I would not recommend Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for adults. And I would never subject a child to this. I mean, this is just wrong. I mean, and I say this as a child who was raised on horror movies. I would be perfectly fine sitting children in front of old Universal horror movies like Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, that sort of thing. I would not put that same child in front of this movie.
Right. Because those, there's something different about movies that are intended to be scary rather than movies that are intended to be kids' movies but are actually pretty damn scary. There's a difference there, I think.
There really is, and frankly, nobody I can think of who was ever played by Boris Karloff or Bela Lugosi or Lon Chaney Jr. was ever as disgusting, creepy, like, I want to shoot this dude, as the child catcher character.
Right. That guy was nuts.
Yeah, so this is, again, awful movie, bad movie, and then to top it all off, we find out that everything that happens in Bulgaria, the stuff that Roald Dahl totally made up, never happened. It was just a story that Caractacus Potts was telling in the backseat of the car. So that the entire romance that was supposed to have been building up, the love story that didn't need to be there, is also totally thrown away, and then they have to go out of their way to try and make it work anyway.
Right.
So... yeah. You have anything else to add on this really awful movie?
Yeah, if you've never watched it, don't. If you have watched it, I'm sorry, but you know what we're talking about. However, though, if you disagree completely, if you've watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and think it's the greatest kids movie that was ever made, and it out-Disneyed Disney, feel free to drop us a line. You can find us on the web, as we mentioned, at hermajestiespod.com. You can mention me on Twitter, at Eric J. Dewey, or the show, at hermajestiespod. Ziggy's also available by Twitter. Tell him where.
Yep, I am at CinemaOTR. You can also email me directly at ziggy@cinemaontherocks.com. You can read my review of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang at cinemaontherocks.com as well, along with every James Bond movie except for one, which I just haven't gotten around to writing up yet for some silly reason.
Weird. So weird.
It is so weird. But yes, by all means, drop us a line. You can also go to the comment section on hermajestiespod.com or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/hermajestiespod. We're available for you.
Yes, we are. So,
and we are so available for you that our next episode is one that was programmed by two of you. Yes, our very next episode, we're going to be revealing the winners of our question judgment contest, and we will be discussing the movies that they wanted us to talk about because they questioned our judgment about what we discussed them the first time around. Yep. So look forward to that as our very next episode. And just to give you a little preview, after that we're going to have a very piercing discussion.
So to summarize, James Bond Jr. the cartoon, dumb but
kind
fun.
Kind of fun.
Chitty Chitty Bang Bang book, fantastic. Movie, and 003 and a half, The Adventures of James Bond Jr., the book, only if you're a collector.
Yes. So that sums it up. And hey, I think the curse is broken.
Yeah, I'm glancing at the recording right now to make sure it's still going even, and it is. So I think we're good to go here, folks. We've done it, hopefully.
We finally defeated the agents of scum. Dun, 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 dun,
the curse of the City of Gold has been lifted. But, yeah, so hopefully we'll be back with you soon. I think I'm in a little bit more stable place recording-wise, so hopefully we can get back to a fairly regular schedule for you guys. We appreciate you guys hanging in with us.
Yes, absolutely.
This past few months.
It has been trying for us over the past, basically, half a year.
Yeah.
And one thing that we've noticed is whenever we've dropped something for you, you've all still been there, and we can't thank you enough.
Appreciate it.
So, very much thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll be finding some more contests so that we can do some more things for you in the near future. But again, look forward to finding out the winners of our last contest in our next episode.
Yep.
But in the meantime, I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And he is truly scrumptious. No, just kidding. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network.
This has been another proud production of the Four-Eyed Radio Network. You want to see more shows, go check out www.foureyedradio.com, you winkers.